Ui dồi ôi, xuống này, xuống cả cây này các bác. Ui.
Hàn có trời ướt nọc nên phu bằng bằng. Thắng. Đây là nước sông Kỳ Cùng đang lên.
Cập nhật tình hình nước lũ cho các bác này. Em đi ra ngoài kia xem nó sâu đến đâu. Sâu dã man ra đến Hùng Mai chắc ngập người. Đây một biển nước luôn, nhưng ai đã biết rồi thì.
Đằng sau đây.
Hết chưa, hết chưa? Đi thẳng, đi thẳng, đi thẳng, đi thẳng, đi thẳng.
Across northern Vietnam, a stalled tropical storm has already damaged or flooded more than 400 homes, with local officials warning that number will keep climbing as floodwater keeps rising. And close to 800 stalls, roughly two-thirds of the largest wholesale market in the entire province, are still sitting underwater tonight. Mountain highways are blocked by landslides in at least 2 provinces. Farmland across 5 provinces is sitting under floodwater. Riverside markets and neighborhoods are barely staying open. Here is the important part. The place now underwater is not some flood-prone slum on the edge of town. It is the biggest wholesale market in the entire province, built in the middle of a provincial capital that has stood on this river for generations. Forecasters in the region are already calling this one of the slowest-moving tropical systems to hit northern Vietnam in years. It formed over the South China Sea in the 3rd week of August and slowly strengthened into a tropical storm, with sustained winds near 45 miles per hour and gusts up to 63, a strength meteorologists translate to the low end of the tropical storm scale used in the United States. According to storm analyses, instead of making a clean landfall and pushing inland, it parked itself over the Gulf of Tonkin and spread its rain shield across an entire corner of the country. From the mountain border provinces of Lạng Sơn and Cao Bang, across the lowland rice belt of Bac Ninh, through the coastal city of Ha Long in Quang Ninh province, and all the way south into Thanh Hoa, with warnings stretching as far as the port cities of Hai Phong and Ninh Binh. At the peak of the alert, officials in at least 8 provinces across northern Vietnam, home to millions of people, had issued some form of flood, landslide, or storm warning. Satellite loops tracked by Vietnam's National Weather Forecasting Center on August 22nd showed a wide, disorganized rain band stretching across the entire Gulf of Tonkin, with none of the tight spiral typical of a stronger typhoon, a sign of just how much the storm was leaning on sheer time rather than raw power. In the river city of Lạng Sơn, near the border with China, the Ki Kung River rose to 8.4 feet on the afternoon of August 22nd, still about 2.3 feet below the official flood stage threshold, but climbing by the hour. And in the province's largest wholesale market in Ki Lura Ward, standing floodwater reached 3.3 feet deep, enough to submerge entire stalls and force merchants to abandon inventory on open shelves. Forecasters in Quang Ninh and Hai Phong are bracing for storm totals near 14 inches, with isolated spots forecast to top nearly 2 feet of rain before the system finally pulls away. And in Bac Ninh province alone, floodwater has already covered more than 4,000 acres of farmland, including close to 3,300 acres of rice paddy, an area roughly 5 times the size of New York's Central Park. Still short of the record flood levels this region has seen in past typhoon seasons, but rising faster than in recent memory. That is enough standing water on cropland to turn a single growing season into a total loss for thousands of farming families. But none of that explains why the water reached a market that has stood safely on this river for decades. In the days before the rain turned into flooding, this storm was already on the forecast maps. Forecasters with Vietnam's National Weather Forecasting Center began issuing flood and landslide warnings as the storm crawled toward the Gulf of Tonkin, stretching a corridor of alerts from the mountain provinces on the Chinese border down through the lowland rice-growing lowlands and out to the coast. Provincial authorities mobilized military and police units, rescue boats were pre-positioned along flood-prone rivers, and merchants at riverside markets moved what they could to higher shelves, hoping the water would not reach them this time. It reached them anyway. Overnight on August 21st into the 22nd, rain fell across Lạng Sơn province at a rate of 2 to 4 inches, with isolated spots topping 6 inches in just a few hours. By morning, water was pushing into Key Lura ward faster than merchants could carry their goods to safety. Nearly 100 police and military personnel launched motorboats and inflatable rafts down market aisles that are normally packed with shoppers, helping more than 200 vendors move what they could and treating 2 people for minor injuries. Forecasters in Quang Ninh and Haiphong are bracing for storm totals near 14 inches, with isolated spots forecast to top nearly 2 feet of rain before the system finally pulls away. And in Bac Ninh province alone, floodwater has already covered more than 4,000 acres of farmland, including close to 3,300 acres of rice paddy, an area roughly 5 times the size of New York's Central Park, still short of the record flood levels this region has seen in past typhoon seasons, but rising faster than in recent memory. That is enough standing water on cropland to turn a single growing season into a total loss for thousands of farming families.
Roads buckled under the runoff, hillsides gave way, and a provincial highway snapped shut under a landslide, pushing the number of blocked or flooded points across Lạng Sơn province alone past 290, according to provincial disaster reports. Close to 500 military and police personnel were deployed province-wide to help relocate residents out of the most dangerous riverside blocks. Farther out, the same storm reached provinces that rarely see this kind of flooding. In Ha Long and along National Highway 18A in Quang Ninh province, floodwater closed sections of road and damaged farmland along the coast. In Cao Bang province, to the west, a landslide sealed off a provincial highway at a single point, and National Route 4A flooded in multiple sections, cutting off several mountain communes for hours at a time. And as far south as Thanh Hoa province, well outside the storm's direct path, officials moved 121 households out of their homes as a precaution. When you look at the damage tied to this storm, the numbers do not line up neatly. Different provincial offices and national outlets are counting on different timelines and by different methods. A same-day report from provincial authorities put the toll in Lạng Sơn at around 120 homes with roofs torn off and another 180 flooded. A separate, more complete tally, compiled by National Wire Services, put the same province's losses far higher, at 421 homes affected in total, more than 600 acres of cropland underwater, and close to 3,000 livestock and poultry dead. Local officials have confirmed at least 2 people injured in the flooding, both treated at the scene. As of this writing, no deaths or missing persons have been reported anywhere along the storm's path, though officials in multiple provinces say that could change as floodwaters keep rising into the weekend. Behind those numbers are patterns that repeat from province to province. In Lạng Sơn, market vendors describe losses tied almost entirely to floodwater that sat for hours inside stalls built for foot traffic, not standing water. In Cao Bang, provincial officials link the damage to saturated hillsides collapsing onto roads, cutting off entire communes at a time. In Bac Ninh, the losses are almost entirely agricultural, with rice paddies close to harvest now sitting underwater for days. And in Quang Ninh and Thanh Hoa, the common thread so far is precaution, evacuations ordered ahead of the worst flooding rather than damage after the fact. Everyone tracking this storm agrees on one point. This was not a flood that stayed where anyone expected it to stay. It reached into markets, farmland, and riverside neighborhoods that had gone decades without seeing water like this. Inside the farming communities of Lạng Sơn and Bac Ninh, another quieter emergency is building. The same floodwater that swallowed roads and market stalls also swept through barns and chicken coops.
Close to 3,000 head of livestock and poultry are now confirmed dead in Lạng Sơn province alone, and more than 4,000 acres of rice and other crops are sitting underwater just weeks before harvest in some districts. That livestock and that rice were not abstract statistics before the storm arrived. They were a year of income for small farming households that often carry no crop insurance and have no savings cushion to fall back on. For families who measure their income one harvest at a time, a flooded field this close to harvest can mean a lost year, not just a lost crop. Hundreds of households across at least 3 provinces are still under evacuation orders tonight, especially across Lạng Sơn, Cao Bang, and Bắc Ninh. Soil across the mountain provinces is still fully saturated after days of rain, turning every additional hour of rainfall into a fresh landslide risk for families living below steep slopes and along narrow river valleys. Roads blocked by landslides have already left some mountain communes cut off for more than a day, and disaster response teams are warning that in the hardest-hit districts, full access could take several more days to restore. Here's the important part. While these provinces are still counting flooded homes and blocked roads, the storm itself has not moved on. It is still sitting almost still over the Gulf of Tonkin, 3 days after it first formed. Forecasters are now projecting another 10 to 14 inches of rain for the coastal provinces of Quang Ninh and Hai Phong, with isolated totals near 2 feet, and up to a foot of additional rain over Lạng Sơn and Bắc Ninh before the system finally pulls away. Riverbanks across the region are already saturated from this week's rain, hillsides are weakened, and roads already damaged by one round of flooding are exposed to the next. A second wave of heavy rain on top of that could trigger new landslides, new road closures, and another round of evacuations, just as families are trying to return home and farmers are trying to assess what is left of their fields. For communities that depend on a single mountain road, a new landslide can cut off not just travel, but fuel, food, and medical supplies for days at a time. Here's the important part. The next province forecasters are watching most closely is not one of the 5 already flooded. It is Hai Phong and the string of coastal districts nearby, where forecasters expect the heaviest rainfall totals of the entire storm are still to come. Across the region hit hardest by this storm, the response effort is now stretched across dozens of towns at once. Nearly 500 military and police personnel remain deployed province-wide in Lạng Sơn, with close to 100 of them working the flooded market alone, alongside 2 motorboats and 2 inflatable rafts. Provincial road crews are working to reopen more than 290 blocked or flooded points across the province, while crews in Cao Bang work a separate landslide on Provincial Road 202 and multiple flooded stretches of National Route 4A. Agricultural losses are mounting just as fast. Across the 5 hardest-hit provinces, officials have now tallied more than 7,000 acres of farmland underwater, most of it rice paddy within weeks of harvest, alongside close to 3,000 head of livestock and poultry confirmed dead. In the coastal provinces of Hai Phong, Hưng Yên, and Ninh Bình, maritime authorities have suspended all sea travel and fishing trips until the storm clears the coast, grounding fishing fleets that many coastal families depend on their income.
Vietnam's Dike Management and Disaster Prevention Authority, the national agency that coordinates flood response across all 34 provinces, is compiling damage reports from each affected province into a single national picture, though officials there caution that the count from mountain districts still cut off by landslides will not be complete for several more days. Vietnam's National Weather Forecasting Center is issuing updated bulletins multiple times a day, and provincial governments in Lạng Sơn and Cao Bang say they are prepared to keep military and police units deployed through the weekend if the rain does not let up. In the weeks ahead, this storm is likely to be remembered as more than just another named tropical system. Forecasters and disaster management officials are already describing it as one of the slowest-moving storms to affect northern Vietnam in recent memory because of the way it combined weak wind speeds, an almost stationary track, and days of rain landing on ground that was already saturated before it arrived. It exposed weak points that officials in the region have flagged for years, mountain roads that were never built to withstand days of continuous saturation, riverside markets and neighborhoods built generations ago before today's rainfall patterns were on the map, and rural farming communities in border provinces that are still not fully insured against a single bad flood season wiping out a year of income. Communities along the Kekung River in particular have flooded before, but rarely with a storm system parked overhead for this many consecutive days. At the same time, scientists and climate researchers are careful with their language here. No single storm can be blamed entirely on climate change. But this storm fits into a pattern that experts across the region say is becoming more familiar: tropical systems that move unusually slowly and stall for days instead of pushing through quickly. That means when a slow-moving system does line up with ground that is already saturated, the result can be heavier flooding, more landslides, and damage that spreads across far more provinces than the storm's wind speed alone would suggest. This storm is also prompting questions about investment. How much should be spent to reinforce mountain highways that keep failing in the same spots year after year? How to protect riverside markets and neighborhoods that were built for a climate that no longer quite matches the one they're living in now? How to give small farming households some kind of financial cushion before the next storm wipes out a harvest? And, just as important, how to protect border province communities that have the fewest resources and the longest distances to travel before help arrives? In the end, the story of this storm is not just a list of flooded acres and damaged homes. It is a reminder of how quickly normal life can unravel when a weak storm, saturated ground, and aging infrastructure all line up at the same time. A tropical system that never grew stronger than a moderate tropical storm managed to flood a provincial capital's largest market, cut off mountain communes with landslides, drown thousands of acres of rice paddy, and leave a recovery bill that will take weeks to fully add up. For the merchants of Lạng Sơn Jinghuang market, this storm will be remembered not as a line on a weather map, but as the morning the water rose faster than anyone could carry their goods to higher ground. Yet it has also revealed something else: neighbors wading through flooded lanes to help carry a stranger's goods to dry ground, soldiers and police rowing boats down market aisles that are normally packed with shoppers, farmers wading into flooded paddies to salvage whatever rice they can before it rots, and disaster crews working through the night to reopen a single blocked mountain road. In every flooded street, there is also a story of people trying to hold their communities together. If you live somewhere prone to flooding or landslides, what would you want your local officials to fix before the next storm even forms?